Welcome to the webinar. We've got a great crowd for how to double your billing without doubling your efforts. I'm your webinar leader, Chris Lytle, and that's about the way I'm dressed today, so I'm not going to turn on the video, but I want to get right to the purpose, process, payoff. Every meeting should have a purpose, process, payoff. Every sales meeting, every client meeting, every scheduled sales conversation. What are you trying to do? How are you going to do it? What's the benefit for the person who's in the meeting? So purpose, I want to challenge you to look at your monthly billing in a more systematic way. And then I want to help people, especially new people, but everybody forgets this because we just get so busy trying to make our number. I want to help you understand and isolate the 7 components of your billing. Did you know that there are actually 7 components to your billing? And we're going to get to that early in the webinar. This is dry, it's analytical, it's not sexy, but once you understand what the 7 components are and start to set goals in all 7 areas instead of just I got to bill more, I got to bill more, I got to bill more, then really good things can happen. So a very important part of this is to get you, convince you to isolate and understand the 7 components of your billing. The process we're going to go through, stories, theory, boring theory. Well, actually, Kurt Einstein said there's nothing more practical than a good theory. So if you have a good theory and apply it, it can be very practical. It can be dry, but it can be practical. So one of the first stories I'm going to share with you is how I got my sales team in Madison, Wisconsin to focus on fewer prospects and advertisers and really increase their billing quickly. And there was a reason I did that, and I really haven't deconstructed this story for a long time. And as I was preparing for this session, I started remembering all the things I went through as a new sales manager, and how all the mistakes I made and all the turnover that we had at our radio stations, and it really got me excited to share this with you. So we're going to talk about concepts. You're going to get worksheets, and you can download those from the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel. Some of you are just joining us late. I made that announcement. There's a handout section now. You can download the forms and this slide deck, so you can review this at your leisure after it's over. Anytime you have a question, or comment on what I'm saying, just send it over. I've got the question and answer thing right up on my screen, and happy to hear from you. And at the end, we'll have time for some Q&A. So the payoff, I'm really serious. You ought to be able to double your billing, not next month, but in the next few months, in the next year certainly, by using the content of this webinar and applying these principles. I mean, you could say this is a time management seminar disguised as account list management. And I really want to try to convince you to do some math this week. Take 45 minutes this week and analyze your billing using these things that I'm sharing with you coming up. And then as soon as you get your November billing, take another 40 minutes to analyze that, and then decide if you want to keep doing this month after month. Just spend 45 minutes every month analyzing your billing and setting goals to change the way you're doing it. So that's the big idea here. So you want to leverage your time, set better, clearer goals, leverage your time, ask for and get bigger orders. We're going to do all that in an hour or less. So if you're just joining us, and I see some of you are, we have the handouts over in the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel. Please download those now or before the end of the session. Now, Leverage is a great TV show. It's run its course now, but I really like Leverage. But we define leverage as the ability to influence a system or an environment in a way that multiplies one's efforts without a corresponding increase in the consumption of resources. Your time, your energy, your gasoline, driving all over the place to try to get a sale. This is Archimedes, and of course, Archimedes of Syracuse, the Greek, lived from around 287 BC to 212 BC, was an ancient Greek mathematician, physicist, engineer, inventor, and astronomer, one of the most brilliant mathematicians of the ancient era and maybe of all times. And he famously said, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. Now that's real leverage. But you'll have leverage, leverage your time, leverage your energy, leverage your account list after the session. So as a new sales manager, one of the words that we use is more. I want more billing. Get more billing. Get more billing. You got to make your number. You got to bring in, and everybody wants more. Your company is not going to lower the goal in 2016. My company isn't either. Sometimes managers, when we're not making the goal, hit the panic button. So you got the more button, we got the panic button. What we really need in this business, the radio business, is the how button. How do we make our number? How do we hit the goals? How do we make our account list and our time management more efficient, the operation of that? So let me tell you a story, because that's what I do. Once upon a time, there was a very young sales manager named Chris Lytle. He was put in charge of a team of 8 or 9 people in Madison, Wisconsin, and people kept quitting, usually the bottom biller, the 7th, 8th, or 9th biller. And I'd have a sales meeting, and I would say, folks, next week we have a new person starting. She's taking over for Bill, and her name is Andrea. And I need you to give up, each give up 5 accounts so I can get her an account list. And boy, they gave up accounts willingly, 5 of them. And of course, they gave up the meanest, the cheapest, the grumpiest, the hardest to see, the hardest to sell, the slowest to pay clients or prospects on their list. And so now I have this brand new person starting, Andrea, and she gets the Charles Darwin account list. These are the accounts that our top people couldn't sell. These are the accounts that everybody else didn't want, and so we give them to the new person, and if she can survive on this account list for more than a quarter, she will be one of the top performers in the marketplace. But you know what happened? Usually that person failed because the people were mean. Oh, it's you. You're the 18th salesperson that's called on me from that station. Can't you people keep anybody? And that just went on and on and on. And then I was reading about management because I've been promoted to sales manager, and I got an article in the Harvard Business Review, and it said, if you're calling on more than 50 accounts, you don't have an account list, you have a hunting license. And I thought, wow, I got people that have 120 clients. I got people that have 200 people, and they're just hogging all these accounts, and I can't create a good list for a brand new person. Then I've got turnover at the bottom of my sales team. And that, by the way, I inherited all that. And I perpetuated it for a while. But then I was, reading more, and I came across Vilfredo Pareto, and of course everybody's heard of him. He was the Italian economist who discovered at the turn of the century, or right before the turn of the century, the 1900s, that 80% of the Italian landowners, 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population, 20% of the land owners. 80% of the land owned by 20% of the population. So that became known as Pareto's principle. It's been called the law of the vital few. It's been said that 80% of the beer is consumed by 20% of the beer drinkers. 80% of your sales may come from 20% of your customers or your account list. We know this. This is the corollary. The bottom of your bottom 20% of your customers give you the most headaches because they're not spending all that much. They don't get great results. They may pay slowly. They want 7 tags on 5 commercials. And you got to go out and service them just like you service your top people. And you've got to write copy for them. And if you accidentally sell it, you got to turn in the order. You got all that paperwork. And you spend about as much work getting them on the air as you do getting your top people on the air. So I started thinking about that. I started thinking about the Harvard Business Review article. If you have more than 50 accounts, you don't have an account list, you have a hunting license. Then I started thinking about Wilfredo Pareto, and I just challenged my team to find out where 80% of their billing came from. And I made this form, and this was one of the first, this was in my correspondence course, this was in my first book, this for, say, the 80-20 analysis. Let me see if I can find it. I put it out over here too. There it is. So the account list management system, figure out where 80% of your business is coming from. And let's just put our largest advertiser, second largest advertiser, third largest advertiser in and find out where 80% of the business is coming from. And then the other form that you have is the 7 components of your billing form. And if you just joined us, you can get these forms and the slide deck in the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel. So it's not about forms, okay? This is not about forms. This is about data. And I thought about that this morning as I was preparing for this session, and I decided I would just demonstrate this on a legal pad. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly, but I've got an account list, and the first thing I do is I insert my billing, which was $18,050, and I multiply it by 0.80 and find out that 80% of my billing is $1,440. This could be your billing. This could be anybody's billing. Pretend it's yours for now, but then do this analysis for yourself. Now here, I've just added up all of the advertisers it took to make 80% of the business. So if you look at this, way down here, I've got $1,440 from 17 clients, and I have 68 clients on an account list, so 25% of my clients and prospects make up 80% of my billing. Might be nice to know. And then I look at this, break it down a little bit further, and the first 4 clients in this particular example bill $7,200. Half of my billing, half of my $14,000 comes from 4 people. It's interesting. And then look, to get the rest of my 80%, it takes another 13 clients. Maybe I should try to upsell some of those people in the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th places. And I start making observations. I do this exercise. Where does 80% of my business come from? And I make observations. That's all. Man, if I had 12 more advertisers like my first 4, I'd double my billing because I have 16 clients, and I'd be billing $28,000 with 16 people if I could just find 12 more like my first 4, or if I could upsell some of the people on my list, or if I get new business that was above average. So I'm using this exercise, and I'm riffing on this a little bit because I want you to do it for yourself. Get a sheet of paper, use one of the forms, make an Excel spreadsheet. I don't care. It takes about 10 minutes. You take your top biller, second biller, third biller, fourth biller, and you add them up until you get to 80% of your business. So I did it, and there it is. I got 80%. 80% of the billing comes from 17 advertisers. There that is. And then I have 68 advertisers on my account list, so I divide that. I get 25%. 80% of my business comes from 25% of my account list. Interesting. see, 50% of my billing comes from 4 advertisers. After a 50%, it takes 13 more advertisers to get to the 80%, and I did the average. Their average spend is $556. So that's interesting to know. And so I go to my 7 components of my billing, and I made this form years ago. I gave you this form in your handout section, and I'm just going to do this on a piece of legal pad again. We're going to talk about the 7 components of your billing, and the 4 of the 7 components are on the bottom of the page. So everybody wants to, well, here's what I billed. Okay, I got to know what my billing was, and that's really the 7th component. The rest of this is how you build it. This is what you build, but the rest of the 7 components is how you build it. And so you had how many advertisers billed? 24. Okay, then I divide 24 into 18,050, and I see that my average dollar per advertiser is $752. So I've got 3 of my components right there. I got the number of billing advertisers, I got the average dollar per advertiser, I got the total billing, and then I got to find out who billed what. And there are 4 more components, and the next component is my base. And these are the people who are on annual contracts, or they're on quarter-to-quarter contracts, or they're even on monthly contracts, but they've been with you year on year, month on month, and you count on them for going into the next month with the base pretty much intact. You might upsell them, you might lose one, but I've got American TV, Shapey, Conway, Dodge, et cetera, and I've got $8,800 in my base. And I could divide that by, $18,050, and 48% of my business is base or steady eddies, or however you want to label that. Now, the thing is, you could say, well, that's great, or you could say that's terrible. If last month I had 30% of my billing in the base, making it 48% would be really good. If someone else has 60% in the base, I might aspire to that. But I'm not giving value judgments. I just want to know what the numbers are. The numbers will then tell me what to do. And if you think about it, you win with information like this, and you direct your career, you direct your efforts with information like this. You lose without having this information. So you might say, well, how do I feel about that? I wish I had a bigger base, or I'm glad it's bigger than it was last month, but I don't want to judge it good or bad. It's just a number. Now, you might want to set a goal to make it higher, to make your life easier. You might want to set a goal to have more annual business. Who wouldn't? And when you know what it is, then you can set a goal to increase it. If you don't know what it is, you can't set a goal to increase your base. If you don't know what your average dollar is, you can't set a goal to increase your average dollar from $752 to what, 1,000? That'd be nice. So all of these numbers help you with goal setting, help you with direction. Here are the other 4 components. Let's just, we've got 32% of our business is seasonal and flight business. I got the circus came to town, the drive-in movie is going to close because it's winter. I got the golf course closing on me. Then we sold that $250 package, and that brought down my average, but we sold a bunch of new business for these little guys and $250. And I got the new accounts. 9% of my business was brand new business. Total printing, investment services. I did $1,500 in brand new business. If I look at that, and I'm not gonna diagram this with the GoToWebinar tool that drives my wife crazy. I'm not that good at it. But if you look down there by the 9%, it's $1,500 in new business. Every one of my brand new accounts was below average. I could have had one client and one $1,500 client, or my average dollar per advertiser $750. I could have had 2 new pieces of business and done $1,500 in new business. Why did I ask for $300? Why didn't I go in and ask for $1,000? So I look at that, and then this renewal, 11% of the people that I put on for the first time, let's say you put them on for 13 weeks and they renewed their contract. So I call that a renewal. That's sort of the transition between base and new. So I've got 7 components: seasonal, flight, I've got new, renewal, I've got base, and then total dollar per advertiser, total number of advertisers, average dollar per advertiser, and my total billing. So that's the 7 components. You've got a form with that on it. You don't need a form. I just did it on a legal pad. It took me 45 minutes this morning to create that. So I make some other observations. My average dollar per advertiser is $752. 8 of my 24 advertisers that were on the air are above average. And I already said the average dollar for my new advertisers was only $375. 50% of my business comes from 4 advertisers. I said that before. The average spend of my base customers is $8,800 divided by 9, which is $977. So that's pretty good. I could get it up. I could do some upselling there. There's some people that are underspending, or they're spraying and praying. They're on a bunch of media. They bought the placemat at the restaurant the other day. Somebody bought 1 billboard. So I can try to convince them to quit spraying and praying. And so all I'm asking you to do at the end of this session, or you might want to leave now and just go fill out the form and see what it tells you. Because once I showed that to my salespeople, somebody said, well, I've got 80% of my business comes from 17 accounts. I said, yeah, why don't you just triple that? You can have 51 accounts. Drop the other 100 you're hanging on to. You can pick any 51 accounts that you want. Really? Yeah. And if you make a proposal, or you bring a spec spot to one of those accounts, and they say no, and you go back again, they say no, drop that account, and I'll give you another account. But I don't want you working 150 accounts. I want you working 51 accounts. That's 80% plus 80% plus 80% is 240. You can have a 240% increase with 51 accounts if you just work them right. Now, see, that's why I told you this would be a little dry. But as a consultant, a very young consultant, I was consulting with a general manager in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and I'd come down from Madison, Wisconsin to Arlington Heights, and we were sitting in his office, and he was all frustrated. He said, my salespeople have account decision stress. And I said, well, Steve, I've never heard account decision stress before, but I'm willing to believe you. I just want to know what you mean by account decision stress. And he said, well, I make them make 50 calls a week. They got to make 10 calls a day, 5 days a week. And so they'll go to a strip mall and they'll walk into everybody, and then they'll go to another place. There's so much retail out here in suburbia, and we cover all these suburbs, and there's all the strip malls and all these little businesses. And by the end of the month, they've made 200 calls, but they haven't sold much. And so you think about that. You can make 1 call on 200 advertisers, or 2 calls on 100 advertisers, or 3 calls on 67, or 4 calls on 50, or 8 calls. Where's your leverage? Somewhere toward the bottom. When you start seeing fewer people more times, getting to know them, bringing them ideas, giving them spec spots, writing proposals, giving them reasons to do business with you. I said, you've got to, first of all, not require 200 calls on one call on 200 different people. You've got to start getting people to make 8 or 9 calls, or 4 or 5 calls on 50 advertisers, or even fewer. You've got to get your list cut down and get people focused. And of course, once he did that, good things started to happen. Now, do the math for yourself. Find out what your reality is and act on the data. So years ago, when I was a young salesperson, Jim Williams was the trainer. He went all over the country. People went out to his seminar in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was a crazy trainer that had all these wild ideas, but he got you thinking. And one of the things that he said to me early in my career is that most radio, and that's his cartoon, success must be a requirement, and he smoked all the way through his seminar. Most radio advertising salespeople won't ask an advertiser to spend more in a month than they make in a month. And I sat there in his seminar and I went, holy, what if he's right? And I went, wow. And he went on to say, because if you're making $30,000 a year, let's call it $36,000. You're making $3,000 a month. You're paying everything with $3,000. That's how you raise your family. That's how you eat, have fun, send people to school, buy school supplies, take a vacation. And for somebody to be able to spend $3,000 a month on advertising, that's an insult. I'm not even making $3,000. So I'm making $3,000 a month. How can they afford to spend more than that on advertising? And so, I pioneered this. It's old school. You should be doing it now, even though it's old school. I did it with the old rubber stamp kit, which I sold thousands of these in my seminars. But the idea was to represent the schedule as as name awareness and make this intangible that we sell called radio tangible. And so all I did here was I made a little calendar with with some boxes and day parts, 6 to 10, 10, and I showed Jeff Jerkins at Octopus Car Wash, this is how many commercials I want you to run this week. It's the largest schedule you're allowed to buy. I talk about this in other programs. I'm not going to belabor it. But my ambition level, I'm required by my management to show you the largest schedule you're allowed to buy, because my ambition level may not be as high as yours. But you're a business person, and you ought to know if you have a big promotion you want to do, if you're thinking about running a full-page ad in the paper to promote something new, you're allowed to do this on the radio. And your name is in each one of these commercials 8 times, so you got Octopus times, you got 144 commercials. What is that, 24 a day times, it's like 168 commercials. It's 24 a day times 7. So it's 168 commercials. Well, that's a lot of commercials. We'll just scratch out the ones you don't want, and I'll refigure the price. And, of course, that was the old Dale Carnegie. Nobody wants to crack. They love their name. They love the name of their business. So we would show these schedules and sell them. I mean, we were selling them for $2,200 a week, which was a full-page ad in the Madison newspaper. But if you're not doing that, if you're not showing people the largest schedule they're allowed to buy because you don't think they can afford it, because you want to protect them, they're business people. They're already taking a risk. I was in Reno doing a seminar a long time ago. They said, "You going to come gamble with us tonight?" I said, "No, I started my own business. So, I don't need to gamble. It's gambling running your own business." But this is the most important thing about this. If you don't show large schedules, the ride down is easier than the ride up. So think about, and I know there are a lot of women on the call, but I'm a guy, so I go in to buy a suit. And a good clothing salesperson at Nordstrom, at Macy's, at Joseph A. Bank, doesn't matter where you go, they're going to put you into they're first of all going to guess your size. You're about a 44 long? Yes, sir. Well, let me try this on for size and see how you look. And of course, they try on the most expensive suit in their inventory, and they say, "How do you like it?" You look at the sleeve and roll up the sleeve and look at the price tag, and you say, "That's a little more than I intended to pay." Well, let me show you something a little bit less. But here's the thing: if they start me in a $2,000 suit, and I end up in a $1,200 suit, 40% off. They start me in a $600 suit and try to get me to a $1,200 suit, it's a 100% increase. The ride down, 40%, is easier than the ride up. You're not going to talk me up 100%. Let me talk you down 40%, and you still sold me the $1,200 suit. The ride down is easier than the ride up. Now look at this. This is the largest schedule you're allowed to buy. But you know what? This is not a huge promotion. Let's run this little one. Now the little one is 9 spots a day times 7 days a week at 63 commercials. This is now the little one. But if you've got somebody running 3 a day, getting to run 9 a day is a 300% increase. The ride down is easier than the ride up. Now, I follow this guy named Dan Sullivan, and he's a strategic coach. He lives in Toronto, and he has a place in Chicago, and he works with executives. I haven't spent the $25,000 to work with him, but I've been to a couple of his introductory seminars. I've read a lot of his books. We remain young to the degree that our ambitions are greater than our memories. And that's one of the great lines. He said, always make your future bigger than your past. And it's really good advice when you turn 65, which I have. But he also says, and this is really for entrepreneurs and salespeople, some people write you small checks for the time you invest in them, and some write you big checks. If you want to experience a bigger future for yourself and your business, you'll need to focus on people who write you the big checks and find more people like them. So it's the largest check theory. And I think that's really one of the most important ideas. What's the biggest check somebody's writing you now? Is it 1,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 3,000? Then you've got to find more people like that. And if not, find people almost like that, and talk to the people that are writing you the checks and ask them for a referral, because that's the way you build a successful radio sales career. Now, the problem is we're all monitoring. We're monitoring other stations. We're prospecting, and I had a manager when I was a young salesman. He was the general sales manager, Phil, and I was the young sales manager. And he's monitoring the country radio station, and he hears the bait and tackle shop on the air. And he says, "Who's calling on the bait and tackle shop?" And I said, "No one." "What? They're on WTSO. That's our biggest competitor." I said, Phil, it's a bait and tackle shop. They run 3 spots a week in the fishing show. We've sent people out there, and they want a fishing show. We don't have a fishing show. And I'm not going to send somebody from Fitchburg, this is where our radio station was, around Lake Mendota, and Lake Mendota is like 20 miles around. And to get there is like, you have to drive by so many good prospects to get to the bait and tackle shop who has $100 a week to spend and doesn't want to buy a station that doesn't have a fishing show. I want my people focused on people who can spend more money and who want to buy what we're selling. And so we argued about that, but I think he finally relented, and nobody ever sold the bait and tackle shop, but they sold a lot of other big deals. Remember the Jim Williams quote: very few radio salespeople will ask for an advertiser to spend more in a month than they make. Remember Dan Sullivan's quote: you've got to find people who write you big checks and then find more people to write you big checks. And one of the things that we really need to talk about is business dollars versus personal dollars. And business dollars are different because businesses have cash flows and businesses have payrolls and they have rent factor, they have floor planning, It's expensive to be in business. And this is the break room, the customer lounge at Zimbrick Auto, one of the Zimbrick auto dealers in Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know how many dealerships Zimbrick has now, but it's upwards of 12 or 13 different brands under their car group umbrella. And I was told by the advertising agency for the Filter Fresh coffee guy that Zimbrick, this is the car dealer with multiple locations. Their coffee budget is $35,000 a month. And so if you think about that, if you go in with a radio schedule that's $1,000 a month, that's $3,000, what's it going to do? That's not even my coffee budget. And so you got to get into their financial attention span. You got to get to where you wake them up with your proposal. This is the largest schedule you're allowed to run on our radio station. What do you have that you could advertise that would make use of money and get a lot of people coming in here? That's the kind of conversation I want to have. And so I use this because we're all bundles of values, beliefs, attitudes, roles. And once you believe that what you have is valuable and that people can spend more than you're asking, and then you go out and use it. If you don't believe that people can spend more than you're making, if you don't believe that they'll buy bigger schedules if they're asked, if you don't believe that a big schedule could actually help them sell more and they'd be thanking you for selling me that big schedule, then you probably won't go out and do it. But once you start to believe in this stuff, good things will happen. We talk about business dollars versus personal dollars. Now, I have a $2,000 cat, and his name is Titan. And when Sarah said we're going to go down to Southern Illinois, I found a breeder, and we're going to get this cat, and we got to bring cash. I said, "Are you crazy?" Because you can't write that off. The business doesn't pay for that. That comes out of our income. I said, I better love this cat. And I remember walking in, we made the transfer of the cat in the cage, and there he was. And I said, oh my gosh, what a great, beautiful cat. And there he is coming on the way back to Chicago, and here he is now on the porch. Beautiful cat. He'll lay on my desk sometimes. And I'm glad I have him, but when you spend that kind of money on a cat, it's different than spending that kind of money on advertising or rent or payroll or anything else. Business dollars versus personal dollars. All right. Let's look at the hard way to double your billing. And I've got this little graphic, and you can do it you should do it for yourself. You should make your own little chart. But let's just, we got a month where we got 20 people on the air, and the average dollar per advertiser is $1,000. So we bill $20,000. And look what's going to happen if I just make little increases. If I don't work on the average dollar per advertiser, I got 24 hours. Now I got 28 people on. Now I got 30. Finally, I get 40 people on the air, and I double my billing. I'm working twice as hard. I'm writing more copy. I'm writing more orders. I'm spending more time servicing. I'm trying to keep people happy. And there's nothing wrong with having 40 advertisers on the air. But look at this. There's an easier way to do it. If I would just get one more customer and upsell and get my average dollar per advertiser up to $1,100, I've got a $23,000 billing. Add one more advertiser, increase my average dollar per advertiser $100 more. Now I'm at 26. And look at this. I get 26 people on the air at a $1,600 average, and I've more than doubled my billing. Nothing works out quite this perfectly. This is an example to show you that if you're increasing your average dollar per advertiser, if you're setting goals to have a higher average dollar per advertiser, if you're asking for bigger orders and showing people larger schedules and using the leverage of the ride down is easier than the ride up, then you start to increase that. If you don't know what your average dollar per advertiser is, you can't set a goal to increase it. If you don't know where 80% of your business comes from, you can't set a goal to make that different. So information is power in this particular equation. So you've got the hard way, you've got the easy way, and the easy way is to increase your average dollar per advertiser while you're increasing your number of billing advertisers, but not by doubling the amount of people you have on the air. A couple of more things. We're going to finish at really about 45 minutes. I hope you're finding this valuable. I said it would be dry, but I'm not going to belabor it. I was in Barrie, Ontario, doing a seminar years ago. That's beautiful Barrie, Ontario, not too far from Toronto, and we were doing a seminar for the advertisers in Barrie, and I said, how would you like the radio reps or all the advertising reps in Barrie to treat you differently? What do you want from your radio reps that you're not getting? And one business person said, treat me like I'll be in business next month. He said, you people come in here and you offer me some package or a quick deal, but you don't give me a plan to help me build my business over time. And so just think about that. You can have a whole sales meeting around this. How would you act differently if you're going to treat people like they'll be in business next month? And at the very least, have a minimum billable order. Minimum orders are always good, but have a minimum order or a minimum billable order. And I showed this picture of Dallas because I was consulting once with a radio station down there, KLTY. It was a Christian radio station. It was highly rated in the marketplace. And they had a $5,000 minimum order. You could not get an order into the computer that wasn't $5,000. It didn't have to be for a month, but it had to be $5,000 or more for whatever the run was. And one time a fairly new salesperson came in, and the order was $4,850, and the sales manager sent it back. The general manager wouldn't let it on, and it ended up where the sales rep actually wrote a $150 check to the manager to get the order on. Whether that's legal or smart, I don't know. But one of the things that happened when that happened is the salespeople started telling the brand new people that came in, don't ever turn an order in under $5,000. They'll kick it back to you. That's not big enough to do any good. Go out and ask for more. Go out and have a little swagger and ask for more. So I tell you that story. If you can't have a minimum order, have a minimum billable order. You know, we don't send out bills for anything less than $1,000. Pick a number, but don't have people slow pay people, you know, and going out and trying to collect little deals. Have a minimum billable order. You could cash in advance. All right. So we talked about a lot of things. Let's go back. I'm going to go all the way back and just see if I did what I said I was going to do. Let me see if I can do this. Stand by. We said, challenge you to look at your monthly billing more systematically, do an 80-20 analysis, come up with the 7 components of your billing, and I've given you the forms to do that, but I said forms aren't important. Do it on a legal pad. You can do it anywhere. You can do it on a spreadsheet. I told you the story about my days as a sales management and giving people the Charles Darwin account list and getting them to turn over, and how I came up with this, you know, the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, and then I've given you some examples of other stations and other people. I've given you the quotes from Jim Williams and Dan Sullivan. You've got your worksheets, so we got that. And you tell me whether or not I've told you how to double your billing. You can do it by controlling the 7 components And the only way you can control things is to know, you got to control the things you can control. And you can control how much you ask for. You can control your goals. You can control your energy and your activity levels. You can't always control whether people will buy, but you should be able to leverage your time, and you should be able to ask for and get bigger orders, because now you believe that you need to get people writing you bigger checks and that they can afford to do it. So let me go back to this question. Education without action is entertainment. To know and not to do is not to know. I hope you enjoyed, I did this for your improvement, not for your enjoyment, but I hope you're getting something that you can take action on. And so the question is, do you have one or two specific things you can do as a result of attending this webinar? And then what is your first physical action step going to be, and when are you going to take it? So those are the things to focus on. And I will certainly entertain questions and comments. And I see a first couple of things. Cool of you to do this, Chris. Thanks. Thank you, Dave and Nancy. We'll be sending out a link to the webinar recording. Yeah, we're gonna put this up. We're gonna put this up in the next 24 hours or so. I'll render it and I'll have Grace get it onto our Spark site. It'll be in the free section of the Spark website. I'll let everybody who's attending this know where to find it. So I'm not seeing other questions. I'll remind you that a few people joined late. If you go to the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel, you can get all of the whole slide deck, all of the forms, and I really challenge you to do the 80-20 analysis and to write down, and then to do the 7 components of your billing form, and then to write down your observations, and then to set goals. Thank you, Gary. And Bill. All right. All right, we're going to call it a show. I will get this recorded